songs called This Is All I Ask. And I'm not going to bore you with singing, but I would like to quote this song. And Al, in just typical Al way, might say, why? Because, you know, we like you, Al, just like Mickey Mouse. I want my life to go on like Al's, where he loved everybody and everybody revered him until the very end. As I approach the prime of my life, I find I have the time of my life learning to enjoy at my leisure all the simple pleasures. And so happily I concede, this is all I ask, this is all I need. And Tony Bennett does a great job of it. Beautiful girls, walk a little slower when you walk by me. Lingering sunsets, stay a little longer with the lonely sea. Children everywhere, when you shoot at badmen, shoot at me. Take me to that strange enchanted land grown-ups seldom understand. Wandering rainbows leave a bit of color for my heart to own. Stars in the sky, make my wish come true before the night has flown. And let the music play. As long as there's a song to sing, and I will stay younger than spring. Thank you.
I'm Gene, I'm an alcoholic. I got sober January 20th, 1983. And from the very start, Al was a part of my sobriety. You know, as I look out in this room, he touched lives. I was thinking this morning what I wanted to say, but Al was a lifesaver. And he always had that smile. We're all going to miss him. And he touched lives. I can't even describe how many lives he's touched in his lifetime. I remember when I became secretary of 400 West Campbell, and I had to meet with Al and Jack before my first meeting. And we went through some stuff, and then I was turning to walk away, and Al hollered at me. And he says, do you know we don't have drunkalogs at this meeting? And I said, well, what am I supposed to do? He said, well, you tell the chairperson we don't have drunkalogs, and if they have to tell one, you have a backup. That's one of the times that he was specific in his instructions to me, and I followed along. I loved him, and I know all of you loved him. Thanks a lot.
I'm Tom Romofsky, a very grateful alcoholic. My sobriety date is January 1st, 1993. Don't ask me how long. In other words, making 20 years. It's unreal. I had a lot of help. And I came into the Easthouse family when I was 19 years old. I walked across the street and got hit by a car, and the Easthouse family took me in and somewhat nursed me back to health. In other words, I spent about a month and a half at their house. Vern had dropped me off. We used to work together, and we were roommates. And anyway, he would drop me off there, and Bernice and I and Bob and the neighbor across the street, they taught me how to play Scrabble, and we played cards. Anyway, my relationship with Al became more work-related because Vern and I worked for the old man for a number of years, probably about 12 out of my life. Anyway, we worked for a man called Don Nystrom, and Al had taken a program called a critical path method, and he would schedule all of the subs and everything, and our gig was to take and run the arrows up the old man's ass. So we would work harder to frame the houses up faster so he'd have to reschedule everything. We figured he wasn't doing nothing. But anyway, this man taught me a lot about the trades over the years, and my relationship with him was more, he took me in like a son. He taught me things that he wouldn't teach Vern. And I said, how come you ain't got Vern over here doing this with you? He's out to lunch. He's chasing ladies right now. He's going through a divorce. He don't want to learn this stuff. So anyway, my sobriety thing with Al Easthouse came at a very later date, and every time I would go over there and talk to him, it would be basically remembering old times of different people, and he was just like a father to me. He made me part of his family, and I've been close with the Easthouse family ever since I was a kid, and I appreciate being part of that. And I want to offer my condolences to Vern and all the Easthouse family, and I feel that it's a privilege to be up here to express my feelings of what I felt for their dad. Thank you very much.
Hey, Perez. How you doing? My name is Milton Brock, and I'm for damn sure an alcoholic. Richmond Milton Brock, Sr. You know, they talk a lot about families and everything up here. I was thinking last night that one of the first books I read in Alcoholics Anonymous was Came to Believe, about the spiritual stories real stories, AA spiritual Twilight Zone stories that are in that book, and I thought about Al, because when I got here first time around in 1977, I went to this meeting called 400 West Campbell, and I said, well, these guys don't know what they're talking about. You know, I can still drink a little bit, and I left. Well, I came back in 77 with the guy said my gluteus maximus full of arrows, and struggled. I knew there was a meeting at this place at 400 West Campbell, and I was walking across the parking lot, and I see this little guy sitting on this telephone pole, this one of those logs so the cars won't run in there. And I said, damn, that's that Easthouse guy. Well, the opening was right there, and I walked past Al, and he didn't even get up. But nobody was sitting with him. He was just sitting out there by himself, and he looked up at me, and he said, are you tired of messing with that stuff yet? And I looked at him, and he said, are you sick and tired of being sick and tired? And I said, who the hell is this little guy talking to this 6'2" former Marine, drunker than Hogan's goat? And my heart dropped lower to my toenails. Nobody had ever said that to me before in my life. And I went to that meeting. I had just killed a short bottle of Thunderbird in the parking lot. And I went to that meeting, and I left out of there, and I never had another drink again. Took me 3 years to stop fooling with that other non-habit forming substance abuse stuff that we don't talk about here. But my sobriety day is October 6, 1980. And that's because of Al Easthouse. You see, when I finally got here, I thanked Al so much a few years later, I gave him a hug. And Mrs. Easthouse called me up and says, Milton? And I said, yes, Mrs. Easthouse. You know, you cracked 2 of my husband's ribs. I said, I am so sorry. I just wanted to thank him for getting me sober. So I saw Al in a meeting, and I said, Al, I am sorry about breaking your ribs. And he says, Milty, I've decked bigger guys than you. I said, I still love you, Al. So when my sister Mona Lisa got here, and instead of me getting her out of jail, Pa said never draw anybody out of jail, I gave her a big book and I asked her if she was sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I've got 32 years, she has 29 years. My brother Luther got here. I took him to a retreat and said, who's this? I said, this is Don Dugan, your sponsor. And he said, why? And I said, are you sick and tired of being sick and tired? And he said, yeah, Milton. And I gave him a big book. When my brother Patrick got here, he has 23 years of sobriety. And we flew him out from New York City with a catheter in his chest. And I asked him, was he sick and tired of being sick and tired? And he said, yes, and I gave him a big book. Well, us 4 Brock children have 106 years of sobriety because of one person sitting in a parking lot and had the nerve to ask me one question about my life. I cannot tell you the influence that has on the Brock family. I can't tell you how many people that we've sponsored, that they sponsored, that they sponsored. This is a program of miracles. This is a story for Cain to believe, but it is real. The Brock family, as you know, would not exist except if it had been for Al Easthouse and Gary and Vern and their family. There's not enough words in the English dictionary to describe the love that we have for Al and his family. My brothers and sisters are outside the state, and they just asked me to say thank you so much, Al. Thank you from the bottom of our heart, from the Brock family to the Easthouse family. And rest in peace, my brother. Rest in peace. Thank you.
My name is Lee, and I'm an alcoholic. And my sobriety date is July 17, 1972. And I used to tell Al, because we both have the same month's sobriety, I said, you know, Al, he said, what's that, Lee? I says, you know, we were the sickest, but we got well the fastest. And he agreed with that. Al was my grand sponsor. And Jack Holt was my sponsor for quite a few years, and Bob S. is my sponsor now. And I remember being at his 50th birthday, and they asked the people in there, who is sponsored by Al or sponsored by one of his sponsees, and about 90 guys stood up. And I think that says more than words can convey what Al meant to all of us. You know, I've known the Easthouse family for as long as I've been in the program. And, you know, Al may not be here physically, but he's a part of all of us. And he probably always will be. He'll always have a special place in our heart. He was a good man. He was a good husband, a good father. A lot of times I'll look at Gary and Vern, and I'll see some of Al in them. You know, some of the things that he taught them. He taught them how to, you know, how to become men, how to become fathers, and how to stay sober. You know, he was an example to a lot of people in this room. And, you know, we come into this world with nothing, and Al left with his good name. And he left with a lot of people loving him and caring about him, and he'll always be part of our life. Thank you.
I was told to speak up. Can you hear me? Come on. My name is Sharon Seal, and I'm a very grateful member of Al-Anon. I came into these rooms on January 1st, 1982, before Randy. Like Bernice, I gave him a deadline. You know, you're done, dude. We're finished. And it was the best resolution I ever made. It was the only New Year's resolution I ever kept. And I'm very grateful for that. This summer, Randy and I decided that we would take a teeny tiny travel trailer across the United States to New Hampshire. Now, we pulled a 13-year-old car, which was, you know, you'll see in a minute why I'm telling you that. And we're driving down the freeway, or driving on our way through South Dakota. And we happened into Kadoka. Now, anybody who knows Al, well, maybe not everybody, he was born there. And I said to Randy, Randy says, oh, that's where Al was born. I said, well, let's go. You know, we got to go see Kadoka, South Dakota. There's nothing in Kadoka, California. The Badlands are over there, and the Mount Rushmore is over there. And, you know, down the freeway we went. Anyway, we hopped in, and the next thing I know, we're driving through, and I'm taking pictures. I had my big camera out and taking pictures along the way. And we took a picture of the sign of Kadoka. We thought, oh, well, we'll share this with Al eventually. Next thing I know, Randy's on the phone with Al. And we told him where we were. And he goes, what the hell are you doing in Kadoka? I went, okay, well, all right. So we're taking, you know, and pretty soon we got to laughing. This was in June, right? June, I think, this year. So not very long before he died. And we're taking pictures. Now, I'm thinking I've got this camera and this big thing, and, you know, people are watching us take pictures as we drive through this town with this camera hanging out at one side, laughter going on in the back seat, laughter going on beside me, you know, and Al is directing traffic. And a part of Al came alive that day for us that I've never seen. He went backwards to a kid, and he told us where he grew up, the house he lived in, the park he played in, every amazing memory. And he was directing us, oh, it's right there across the street in kitty corner from the Presbyterian church. I think it was Presbyterian. And so I'm taking these pictures, and I'm looking, and I'm thinking, okay, they're going to come and get us anytime because I'm taking these pictures along the way. But we had this big trailer, so, you know, it's like hard to miss. And people are going, oh, my God, tourists, you know, what the hell are they doing here? And it was so much fun. It was so much fun. I talked to a construction guy who was doing some construction. I talked to a very nice-looking construction guy who was doing construction out in front of the house that Al was born and raised in. And it turns out that he knew the family or was related to the family. Now, I couldn't tell you who that was, but when I said his last name to Al, he knew exactly who he was. Couple weeks later, or maybe not even that long, I put together a little PDF file and sent it off, and I hope with all my heart that he shared all of the stories of Kadoka, South Dakota with his family, because I think that we just had the best time. It was a highlight of a trip, and it was the last time that I talked to Al, and I will miss him enormously. Thank you.
My name is Chris. I'm an alcoholic. First thing I wanted to talk about was at Al's 50th birthday party. somebody asked me why they called him Speed Bump. Al ran over his own arm. And people who visited him or saw him after that, his arm was so black and blue, it was frightening. It really was. So for his 50th birthday, I got him a wheel chalk. I think he still had, or, you know, I think it was still in a garage or something. But the reason that I'm up here today is because I'm like Johnny. I see significance sometimes, maybe where it really isn't, but it makes sense to me. In April, I celebrated 25 years of sobriety, and as a gift, some of the men in my life got me a plane ticket and a rental car, hotel room, so I could go to Akron. And as it turns out, I went to Akron. The day I left was July 22nd, which was Al's birthday. I rolled a couple of family reunions in with that, and I did some other things, but the key thing for me to do on that trip was to go to Akron. And so I went to a family reunion in Ohio. I drove across Ohio, and then the following day, I was going to go to Dr. Bob's house. So I spent the night in Akron, and I got on the computer, and I found a meeting in the west side of Akron so that I could go to it in the morning, because Bob's house doesn't open up until noon. I went to that meeting in the morning. They had it in a bar, which, you know, we've had several in the valley that were in bars, no big deal. But it's hard to tell the people of Akron, Ohio that they're not doing meetings right. You just can't do that. Anyway, I left that meeting, and I got a text. And I got a text from Brian. I promised him I'd mention his name. I got a text from Brian, and Brian said that Al had passed away. And I was on my way to Dr. Bob's house from the meeting. And so when I got to Dr. Bob's house, and they opened it up at noon, I was sitting outside. I was, of course, the first one in there. And they had the guest book, and I signed it in memory of Ali, 62 years. And so later, as I'm driving away and stuff, and throughout that day, I had to stop what I was doing several times. When I was on a freeway, I actually had to pull off the road a couple times and not because of grief or sorrow. I was in absolute awe of the fact that I got to be standing where it all began. Just after hearing that news. And yeah, I'll miss him too. Thanks.
My name's Lloyd Pearson, and I'm an alcoholic. I first met Al in Bernice Easthouse, 1954. At that time, he was 37 years old, I was 35, and he had over 2 years of sobriety. And since that day, we've been close friends ever since. We went to many dances together. We went in plays together, The Trouble with Uncle George, and we put on things at the high school auditoriums and way back when. Made trips to Tahoe and Reno, and also then he called one day and he says, let's go to Mexico. Jim Osborne has MS and he wants us to come down. I says, okay. So we made a 10-day trip down to Mexico, and all with him and Bill Hazenflug. So I got to thank Al Easthouse for all the memories that he has given me, all the times that we talked, all the times that I stayed at his house when I would go, because I left the area here when I was 65 and moved over to Pine Mountain Lake. So when I'd go to Asilomar, I always stayed with Al, except the last few years when my son got a place in Santa Cruz, I stayed with him. Anyway, Al was a good friend, and he used to cut me down once in a while because I got a little bit cocky. But anyway, I'm going to sing you a little song about me. I'm just an alcoholic from Montana. I sobered up in 1962. I found myself another way of living. It's something that I had to do. I no longer fly to see my other women. I come home at night like you're supposed to do. I've got money in the bank, and to Al Easthouse I must thank for keeping me sober since 1962. Namaste. Al, I love you.
My name is Jerry, and I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is September 1st, 1965. And it's just mind-boggling how much impact one man can make on so many people. It is amazing. But he was a man that was very charismatic. I loved being around him. I didn't go to very many meetings that Al went to. I went to Santa Clara in my beginning of Alcoholics Anonymous. In fact, my friend Joe's dad was my sponsor. You know, there's a lot of things that I remember about Al, and it's interesting because, I don't know, for about 10 years, 15 years, I've been going to this liar's table at a restaurant, and I hear all these names being talked about, and I'd never met Lloyd before, but I've heard his name many, many times at that liar's table. And there's a lot of history that went on at that particular time at the liar's table. But there's some other things that I remember, and I've wrote them down here because I don't do very well in front of these mics and different things. But he was so much fun to be around. And the one thing that I learned from him, and I don't know how it came about, but there was a time in Alcoholics Anonymous when I was spending a lot of times doing a lot of H&I work, and I realized, and Al made me realize it as well, that I had to have a little balance in my life. My wife told me one time, you know, you were gone so many times when you were drinking, but it's happening all too many times right now. But it is so amazing how Alcoholics Anonymous works in our lives. We are blessed, and I want to thank the family for asking me to say a few words. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Hi, I'm David. I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date's April 10th, 1989. You know, you look around this room and Al Easthouse has put down some kind of a legacy. You know, as many people that he's touched, the seniority that he devoted to unconditional love and never judged you. I mean, he was a very, very special person. Tom Neary said something about that, since Jack and Al isn't here anymore, that us guys that have a few years, we have to carry the torch. And I'm going to do the best job I know how to do with that. When I first met Vern, he reminded me of a little Banny Rooster. He was the trip. And then when I first saw Gary, he reminded me of a grizzly bear. So we were playing golf in Palm Springs one weekend, and I went into the bedroom where he was sleeping, and he was in his little whitey tighties, and I was in my little whitey tighties with no shirt on. And he looked at me, he goes, "You want some of me?" And I just clamped on him, spun him around and threw him on the bed, and there was this one little old guy named Jerry, who's about 89 pounds, and we landed on him. And that kind of scared us. But, this fellowship is I think is full of unconditional love. In our meetings here about the last month and a half, unconditional love, I think, has come up like 3 different times. Not to judge and to love and never have to say you're sorry is true love.
I'm Artie, and I'm an alcoholic. Oh boy, what can I say about Al? Wow. One of the things that I remember about Al, I can't seem to separate Al from Jack. Because one of the attractions for Ray and I when we got sober, and my sobriety date is January 7, 1962. And was that they were family men. That was so attractive because here we are with a big family, And so they would talk towards this, and we really, really needed to hear what these guys had to say. We met at many dances, Jack and Alice, Al and Bernice. But Al, I don't know, I haven't shared this too much, but in the 1970s, we got involved, not willingly, kind of pushed into a political organization where we had to learn to use 2 hats. We were alcoholics in Alcoholics Anonymous, but out there in this field and in this time, it was just beginning. The monies were just beginning to come into the county of Santa Clara. Federal monies. So there was a little organization that was started, and it was called the Mexican American Council on Alcoholism. Now, this was a stepping stone into Alcoholics Anonymous. A lot of AAs were involved in this organization. Where Al comes in, I loved him. I still do. Was that every time I called him to come in and share, because I knew he had such a message, he never said no. And this is what somebody mentioned here about H&I work. And I know myself and my husband, if we owe a lot to Alcoholics Anonymous. We had to do H&I. That's what kept us sober. These people talked about giving it away in order to keep it. You know, Al will never die, really. You know, he's alive. I mean, you know, look at this room. You know, I don't believe that we die and just we're no more. The message was shared. And you know, it continues, and it was mentioned here already. Unconditional love, you know? This is what we pick up here. And a day at a time it works. You know, so the years have gone by. It's still a day at a time. I loved his simplicity in Alcoholics Anonymous. He called me one day and asked me, Artie, do you know who the first woman at Central was? He needed this information for his archives. And I said that I know of, it was Jane Corbin. So we had a little talk there, you know. I'm not going to take up too much time. I just love to be a part of this. Thank you for asking me.
My name's Mike Riley, I'm an alcoholic. And I wrote something last weekend that I wanted to read about Al. When I spoke at Al's 60th, I made reference to Al being the last great redwood in the grove, and now the last great redwood has fallen. Redwoods grow in circles with their roots intertwined underneath the ground to provide nurturing and support. Al was one of the best I knew at providing support and encouragement, especially to the newcomers. He would not tell you what to do, but rather say things that would make you think and come to your own conclusion. With the last old-growth tree gone, the light is shining into the forest, and nature has made way for the next generation of trees to become giants, having been growing this entire time under the shade of the other trees. That is the way of nature and the way it is supposed to be. Look around you at the trees you are intertwined with and remember your heritage. My father and Al were friends for many years, and Al and his family were very supportive of my mother and my family after my dad passed. Al and I became friends after my dad passed, and every time we talked, he always asked about me and my family. He was one of the most unselfish people I ever knew. He taught me about the four absolutes: honesty, unconditional love, unselfishness, and purity. He lived his life according to these absolutes as contained in his steps to the very best of his ability. I will miss you, Al, and consider myself blessed to have heard you all these years and had your influence in my life. My last meeting of Al is from the meeting he chaired on Monday, July 22nd. And at this particular meeting, we don't hold hands. It was at the end of the meeting, and we were all getting ready. We were all starting the Lord's Prayer, and Al was up there in his up there in his wheelchair. We started saying the prayer. Fernando went over, took his right hand. Another gentleman went over and took his left hand. And Al was like this with his hands up. His head was bowed in reverent prayer. And I thought to myself, there's an angel, and that's where he's gone. Thank you.
I'm Dave, and I am an alcoholic. It's, I'm gonna have to do it whether I sniffle or not. He meant so much to me. When I first met him, it was at Coco's, and he read chapter 5. And then after that, I really wanted him to get to know him, you know, and he talked about leaving. Of course, I wasn't a guy that would ask for help. And, you know, it was in my late 50s when this all took place. I'm 82 now. And so it was a while after that he was just going on vacation. And so I'd gotten another person to help me along and sponsor. So then after that, Bill Stanton, he left and went to
to Gray Eagle, then I got Al to be my sponsor. When I finally got here, I was ready. Ooh, was I ready? I had no place to go. And this is terrible. I was a sneak, a liar, and a cheat. And I lived my whole life like that, afraid of being found out. And Al opened that up and saw all of it. And he still loved me. And he taught me how to live my life the way I was. And he said, and if you don't like what you're doing, then let's look at some way to get it going in a different way. And that's the way I've been doing ever since. And I'm so grateful for knowing him. You're talking about unconditional love, boy. He has turned my life around and introduced me to a whole new way of life. I really want to live. Before, I was disgusted with myself. To get up and look at that dumb guy in the mirror. And now I get up and I really want to live. And life is so good. There's so many people out there that want to live too. So I know that he has helped so many people. And I taught at King's School, the first group. I taught twice there. I didn't cry. But I had Al present there at the meeting. If it wouldn't have been for Al, I wouldn't have been there. It's a good experience that I'm there, and I know that I should be there. I kind of regretted it at the beginning, but boy, I'll tell you, this way of life is wonderful. No regrets.
Hi, everybody. I'm Joel Felios. I'm an alcoholic. And I first met Al the evening of August 28th, 1975. It was my second meeting. It was the Thursday night closed men's meeting. And Jack Dale had taken me to my first meeting the night before. I'd asked Jack to be my sponsor. And Jack said, I want you there early the next night. Jack gave me a directory, circled the meetings that I should attend. And that the next night was the closed men's meeting at 400 West Campbell. So I got there early, and I was sitting next to Jack, between Jack Dale and Jack Holt. And this little guy walks in, and you know how when you're a newcomer, your sensors feel, and I didn't like the feeling that something's wrong here. And I was sitting in the seat that Al normally sits in. So I said, I better get up to Jack Dale, and Al just put his hand on my shoulder and said, you stay right where you are. So that first meeting I sat between Holt and Dale. And in 1983, my sponsor Jack Dale was very, very ill with cancer, and we were talking, and he said, Joel, why don't you consider having two sponsors? And he says, you know, you've always been tight with Al Easthouse. We would think of him. I said, yeah, I like Al a lot. So I asked Al to be my co-sponsor until Jack passed away on May 1st of that year. And Al and I liked the sharing of Al because we talked to each other. Al didn't ever talk at you, he talked to you. And it was one funny story. Bernice, I think Gary's got a little Bernice's competitiveness in games. And Bernice was a very good Scrabble player. So I played her this one game, and I was getting all the good letters, and I beat her pretty badly, and she was fuming. And I just said, hey, Bernice, practice a little bit. I'll come back later. She was fit to be tied. Well, anyway, I came back next week and we played, and she beat me by about 90 points. And she just gave me that mock look of sorrow and said, "Gee, I'm sorry, Joel, that I beat you so badly." And Al just grinned and said, "Beware of the vengeful woman, Joe." And those are the kind of stuff that I remember of Al. It's just always fun, always full of love. And, you know, we heard him on the video say, "At best, I'm a 7 on good days when it comes to purity and honesty." But I'll tell you what, he was a 10 whenever it came to love and unselfishness. Thanks a lot.
My name's Gary Mead, and I'm an alcoholic. And my sobriety date is October 10th, 1989. And it's a privilege and an honor to be here, and it is so nice to see so many of my friends and Al's friends in this room today. I didn't start going to men's meetings right away. I kind of liked women a lot better than I liked guys, and my sponsor asked me to go 2 places, and one of them was to the think tank on Saturday mornings, and he asked me to go to 400 West Campbell to the men's single problem study group. I went there one time, and I got there late. There was nowhere to sit. The room was packed. I didn't like anything that was said, and I left, and I called him, and I said, "I'm not going back." And he said, "Try it one more time." So I went the next week. The same thing happened. I got there late. There was nowhere to sit. The room was packed. Called him again, and I said, "I'm not going back," and I didn't go for 2 more years. That became a home group of mine, and I was fortunate enough to be elected secretary there. Now, and I didn't have the experience of somebody coming up and telling me the rules. There are some rules at that meeting, some things you don't do. You explain to the chairperson what his job is, and there are no drunkalogs. You call on people who regularly attend the meeting, and you try and keep things brief and on schedule. And so I got this guy that I thought had a great message to come in, and there's a list of rules that are in the secretary's guidebook. There's a list of things that chairperson is supposed to do. So I slid it over and I put it in front of the guy, and I said, "You need to follow these rules." Well, I could see as the meeting was going on, I started to get more and more uncomfortable because things weren't going the way it said on that paper. And it got down to the end, and he hadn't called on Al, and he hadn't called on Jack. And I slid that paper a little bit over closer to him, and I said, "You need to make sure you call on Jack." And he didn't. And I looked at Jack, and I got this look, and I looked around the room, and I was getting a lot of those looks. And I just remember being just petrified. And after the meeting, I saw him. I'd never spoken to Al in my life. And here he came out of that chair, across the room and up the stairs. And I'll never forget it. He just looked at me, and then he broke into a big smile, and he goes, "I bet you never do that again, will you?" and you know, I never did that again. I was really careful about how I did those things. I was struggling with some things in my life at one time, and Al was a guy that I always felt like I'd go to at any time and ask him any question. And I was having some real problems at home. And I said, "Al, I'd like to ask you a question." And he said, "Sure, what is it?" And I said, "I'm having some trouble at home." And he said, well, let's see, how's this going? How many meetings are you going to? I said, "Well, 4. So that's pretty good. That's a lot. That's pretty good. How many, are you doing any service work? I said, "Yeah." He said, "You sponsoring guys?" "Yeah." "How many times do you meet with them?" "Once or twice a week." Let's see, that's 6. Okay. So how many days are you spending at home? I said, "Well, 1 maybe." He said, "Did you ever entertain the idea that might be why you're having trouble at home?" He said, "You know, there's really 3 things. There's this program, there's your job, and there's your family. You need to figure out a way to make that balance in your life and how to make that work. If you can do that, you will be an extremely happy man and your life will be successful." Today, I'm a little bit better than I was a few years ago. I'm still not perfect, but I'm getting closer, and it's because of guys like Al who taught me the way. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Marion Wells. I'm alcoholic. And my sobriety date is March 1st, 1988. And I met Al in 1988, and when I started going to the Living Solutions group on Fridays. Him and Jack and Bernice and Alice, and I would sit in the front row lots of times next to Jack, and Al would be over on the other side, and Bernice would be there. And they taught me a lot about family, like has been expressed already today. Gosh, I feel privileged to have worked with Al on the 50-year celebration of the archives in Santa Clara County. I remember him distinctly making sure he would say, you know what, I want to make sure you ding-dongs get it right. And once he told me, I had a lot of conversations with Al over the years at the Friday night meeting, and I remember him saying, Marion, just remember to keep giving back to others, keep giving back to others. And I think it was Al that did introduce me to the 3 absolutes. And when he would talk about the book, The Power and the People, and that would carry me through anything. Another memory, of course, is visiting Al's home was like visiting the grandfather I never had. He always made time to sit and listen. I did have a resentment against Al. And when I heard he was chairing a meeting, his last meeting that he chaired, that it was a men's meeting, I was very upset. I was not happy, and I wanted to go, and that it wasn't fair. And then I was told later, oh, you know, Al would have been okay with it, but I don't think a lot of guys would have been. But, you know, I grew up with Al and Jack, and I feel, thank you so much for letting me share a few words, family.
And Jack come back in 1958, and I quit in 51. So it was 6.5 years later.
And he never drank again?
No. And he became a great speaker. Mm-hmm. Going up and down the coast and all that, you know. I did my fair share, but I couldn't hold a candle to hold. He was the greatest. Anyway, probably one of the greatest speakers we had here. Right. And we had some good ones, but none like that.